Nearly 2 years after a 9.0 earthquake and resulting tsunami that devastated coastal Japan, America is seeing the after effects. How serious is it? We put that question to our guest today, Tim Dillingham, Executive Director of the American Littoral Society. Thanks, Tim, for coming on board and joining us.
Thanks, Brian.
How big is this problem? We hear about this little by little, debris showing up along the western coastline, but this is a big issue.
I think that's a very good way to describe it. When the storm hit Japan, when the tsunami rolled in, it brought about 5 million tons of debris back out into the ocean. And while the Pacific Ocean is a very, very big place, it's connected from the east side to the west side. So now we're starting to see a lot of that debris show up on the shores in Hawaii, in Alaska, in Oregon, along the west coast. The concern, of course, is that it'll bring with it plants and animals which are native to Japan but don't belong in the continental United States.
So we're talking about big ecosystem threats.
Yes, fundamental changes in the way that the ecology works along the coastline. Mother Nature loves to have everything in its place and have a right place for everything else. So when you bring an animal or plant that usually lives on the eastern side of the Pacific and you introduce, or the western side, you introduce it into the eastern side, you end up having a lot of problems because it doesn't belong there.
I know we've seen some of that happen in Florida and other places where you see a plant introduced somewhere or a fish introduced somewhere, and all of a sudden the whole ecosystem's off balance.
Right.
Is that big a threat from this stuff that's coming from Japan?
Well, absolutely, and the highest profile sort of cases of that are the pythons which get released into the Everglades. But we know that we have mussels that have been introduced by ships coming from overseas. Right. We've had crabs. Those have caused, according to Cornell University, who studied the economic impacts of this a number of years ago, upwards of $6 billion a year in economic losses because of these invasive species. They clog water pipes, they foul the boats, they eat the clams that we harvest and use as part of our seafood industry. So even though it is a sort of a creeping problem, it's not as large in perception as the wave itself.
Sure.
It has long-term consequences.
But is there an effort among scientists? Has there been some talk about how we start to address this now before it does become a bigger problem?
Yes, there's been a very good response by the NOAA, which is the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, the federal agency which deals with ocean issues. They've been providing funding to the states. They've been enlisting the aid of scientists and citizens to keep their eyes out for debris as it shows up. Most recently, there was a lot of attention paid to a very big dock that came from northern Japan. Yes. And so they are setting up protocols to respond to this. The scientists are coming in, they're trying to understand which animals might be showing up on the debris and what the consequences are, but also to dispose of it before it gets into the ecosystem.
I understand Hawaii is also in the major way of all of this stuff coming over.
Right, we can think about where the states are that are sort of the leading edge on the Pacific, and that's Hawaii, Alaska, in the Northwest. The currents in the Pacific Ocean move from the north down to the south, and so when the debris came off the land in Japan, it sort of held together in a very large patch, but now 2 years out it's starting to break up and be distributed. So we're seeing it show up on the shores of Hawaii, of Alaska, and the Northwest.
That's going to have an impact on beaches there. Big surf spots might be inundated with garbage and debris. That's just one aspect of it.
Right. Well, clearly nobody wants to see that when you go to the beach. People spend thousands and thousands of dollars to go to Hawaii for a vacation. They don't want to see a lot of garbage on the beach, and I think people are worried about that impact. And then the broader impacts of having the animals into the ecosystem and affecting things that we're concerned about, whether that's the quality of the water itself or other natural resources.
You mentioned getting citizens involved and keeping their eyes open. What can the average citizen do? You walk over to the beach, you're in Southern California or San Francisco somewhere, and you see something floating. Who do they call?
Well, there are hotlines that are set up, mostly the state fish and wildlife agencies, or you go on the web, wherever you are. As I said, NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, has a hotline set up. It really is the idea, though, the government can't be everywhere, and since there are lots of surfers and lots of beachgoers and lots of fishermen in the country, we're trying to enlist them in helping do this. And then I would also encourage them, if it's not a 65-foot dock, to pick up the garbage and take it with them off the beach.
Yeah. Interesting how much surfers have become a big part of keeping an eye on the ecosystems and the oceans. I guess because they're in it more than anybody everybody else.
They are, and they feel the impacts, particularly of pollution. Surfers get surfers' ear, they get, and so it's really great to have them involved as activists in trying to keep the ocean clean and protected.
Yeah. Tim Dillingham, always a pleasure, and we'll look to talk to you again more on this as we get more of this stuff washing up along the coastline.
Great, thanks, Brian.
Thanks.